Hello, everybody. So I'm delighted to see everybody here nice and early to follow the this first opening session of the conference, which is around audiovisual documents and analysis. So as it's the first session, just a few words on how everything is going to work. So each presentation will be 20 minutes. And we're big fans of coffee breaks here, so we'll try and be quite strict about the time. And there will be 10 minutes for questions after each of the presentations. And all of the presenters will still be around afterwards, so if there isn't time to ask your question, no worries. I'm sure you'll be able to catch them at some point. So we're also streaming the conference online, so people following with Ubicast can ask questions in the chat, and we shall try and ensure that all the questions get answered. And also just a quick reminder for presenters and people in the audience wanting to ask questions, to not forget to turn the mic on and to speak into the microphone so that everybody can hear what's going on. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this morning we'll be hearing from 4 people: Olivier Aubert from Nantes University, Mark Williams from Dartmouth College, and Michael Rowe and Peter Broadwell from Stanford University. I'm excited to hear from everyone. I was lucky enough to meet them all in Graz for last year's DH conference, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about their projects. So first, Olivier Aubert is an independent consultant in knowledge engineering and an associate professor in computer science at the University of Nantes in the Duke team. He engages in interdisciplinary research focusing on knowledge modeling, engineering, and visualization with a specific emphasis on audiovisual annotation and digital humanities. As an author and contributor to open source software, he is the architect and lead developer of the video annotation software Advene, actively involved in projects like ADA, so Audiovisual Rhetorics of Effect, and Remind, a method to understand the microdynamics of experience. He also conducts research related to education through open educational content, and has developed dedicated video analysis tools such as Coconuts. So today he'll be talking about one of these softwares, Advene, a project he started back in 2002, taking a look back over its development and offering some lessons learned in that time in a presentation entitled Advene, a look back on 20 years of video annotation instrumentation. So, Olivier, I shall give you the floor.
Hello, everyone. Yes. Thank you, Jacob, for the introduction, and thank you, Klaus and Jacob, for the organization of this conference with an exciting program. We had a great workshop yesterday, and I'm looking forward for the next presentations. That's very, very cool. Smooth. It took some time to get to this transition. As Jacob said, I'm a visiting assistant professor, so with a research hat on, and also a private consultant with engineering hat on. And I like to take both the opportunity of both hats to put things into practice and to reflect on them. And Advene is one of the examples, a long-standing example. I won't, if I may use this microphone. Is it okay for you? Yeah, okay. So I like to use both hats to build things, create things, useful things, and think about them and reflect about them. And Advene is one of the long-standing examples because it's a software we built with other people 20 years ago, and it's still used today and active today. I would like to present to you, because not everyone knows it, and present it to you, and also take some lessons from this long-standing maintenance task of the software. So I will first do a brief introduction about annotations, but to put things into perspective and especially time and perennity perspective, and then present to you Advene and some experiments and the lessons I've learned, good and bad. So I like to, I'm doing a lecture on annotations to students, and I like to use this photograph as a first example to tell them that annotation is not new. So this is an image of Plato's dialogue from 9th century, so more than 1,000 years old. You can see in the margin annotations, and so you can see the documents, you can see annotations in it, and you can consult a document and its annotation for a document that's more than 1,000 years old, so that sets the bar for perennity of the data that we produce. But here the annotations are on the same medium as the annotations medium is the same as the annotation the document, original document. More recently, in the modern world, contemporary world, we can use post-its on images, and here we separate the medium of the annotations from the medium of the original document itself, and we also add other properties like the fact that they are more flexible. We can move them, and they're also, for instance, here categorized because we can imagine that the colors of the post-its can represent categorization. And so this is all inspiration for the things that we get into the computer world. Now we're digital, not like this, but it gives us hints in the history of annotations. And now I'm stopping with the analogies, and we'll get into video annotation. So because here I presented until then text and image annotation. Now, if we address video, then we require computers because we obviously require a player, a video player, something that can play it. And there are many video annotation communities. Advene is far from being the only video annotation software. There are many video annotation softwares built by different communities. And this is just a small example. It's really a small subset of the existing ones. So I try to group them arbitrarily in different categories. For instance, you've got the media studies, and each community has its own focus, so we'll develop specific tools with specific interaction interfaces, specific data models, and specific restrictions also on what it can do. So the thing I'm interested in Advene is media studies, so study of movies, and film analytics and so on. So with other software like Vian, Mediascope, the defunct Ligne de Temps, which existed from Centre Pompidou, from Bernard Stiegler, but I will explain why it's not active anymore. And so these are dedicated at annotating movies, things that have shots, that have scenes, and where you want to develop a critical analysis with a specific point of view. You can also have other more simple annotation tools, for instance, used in teaching. The thing Jacob mentioned, I developed Coco Notes, which was, and there are other things like Travis Go, MediaThread, or Mediate Celluloid, which are simplified versions of annotations because they're focusing on pedagogical uses and exchanges between students and lowering the bar for annotating and increasing the exchanges opportunities between students to have discussions. So I won't go in details into everything. I added performing arts, so because yesterday we heard about motion banks and also about memory recall, and I didn't put scene and recall here because they are not video annotation, they are larger than this. Here I'm focusing on video. Maybe I could mention just linguistics. There are well-known actors here. Enzil and Elan are very well-known softwares that are much used, and not just in linguistics. They came from the linguistic domain. It was their initial focus, and then they switched to they've been used in very different contexts. And in sports domain, which is very interesting because people there are, it's very interesting, especially with the relationship to performing arts, because they share many, they have many things in common, like analysis, team work, either as a team or as individual work or individual actions and occurrences. So here are the different things. And another way to analyze this is just to add a reference to Catherine Marshall It was a work in 1998. It's old. It was an ecology of hypertext annotation, and she proposed a taxonomy of annotation system, hypertext annotation systems, hypertext or hypermedia. Anyway, it's basically the same thing, along different dimensions like expression, visibility, form, audience, and the function of annotation. So. The thing I'm going to present to you, I'm coming to it, Advene, is a software with an explicit annotations, a visibility of annotations from private to public, depending on whether you want to work on it yourself or share it, publish things to other people. And that can do formal to informal annotations, free text to structured with ontologies, for an audience personal to global too. And it's also used for both reading writing and reading annotations because it's an authoring system. It was launched in 2001, so more than 20 years ago, but the project was launched, the idea was launched in 2001 with, together with Yannick Prier and Pierre-Antoine Champin. We were then working at Lyon University in the LYRIS team. The name Advene project means, it's an acronym meaning Annotate Digital Video Exchange on the Net. And actually it's an old word from Webster. It's disappeared now, but you can find it in Webster from 1913. And it means to be added to something or become part of it, though not essential. So that's perfect for annotations. And it's a free software, cross-platform desktop application that you got to install on your computer. It's very old-fashioned. It looks like this, and in this interface you can see the video, which is the central part because we're talking about video notations, and then around it you have different views, interaction views, visualization views that you can call and invoke in different spaces, and depending on the activity you want to carry, and then you can save this arrangement of the workspace as workspace with named views. With names so that they can be re-invoked later. The scientific motivation for Advene was, we had a scientific motivation. Why did we start Advene? We worked in knowledge engineering, document engineering, also in the area of human-computer interfaces, so you wanted to study this and activity traces, but we had also a personal itch to scratch, like in open source software. In 2001, David Lynch released Mulholland Drive, and we had long-standing discussions about the details of Mulholland Drive, how can we analyze this? And we didn't have any software to do it. So we built the software with this idea in mind. The idea to be able to exchange, to accompany some exploratory process of annotating things. So the Advene focus, as I said, there's a focus, is active reading, close reading of a single video. We concentrate on a single video. We're not dealing with corpuses, which is something else, which has other issues. And it wants to be a companion to exploratory research, so with much flexibility in the data structures, in the interaction interfaces, in the outputs, and so on. And it's also meant for offline use, which is something important because we did much train travel. And during long train travels, it's a good opportunity to annotate videos. I won't have time to go into the details here. The important thing, so the rectangle is the data model basically of Advene. You've got the structure that you want to annotate, and this is user-defined. The annotations, obviously user-defined. Also, queries in resources are details. And the view definitions are things that you also define, which are the ways to specify how you want to render annotations, either as hyper videos, hypertexts, like a HTML document generated from the annotation data through a template, standard template that you can reuse, and giving access to the video here on the left, on your left. And on the top, you've got it was difficult to picture, but it's what we call the video playing over there is what we call a dynamic view. It's a way we experimented with a way to modify the rendering of the video based on the annotation content. For instance, here, instead of doing a summary of the video with a nonlinear video editor and cutting, pasting the things into an editor and so on, we had this annotation structure of summary with relationships between the annotations. And there, our dynamic views defines a way to do a summary by jumping from one annotation to the next related annotation without creating a new document. It's just navigating in the original document thanks to this structure. And this helps to think differently about your data and the video. I won't have time to do this. We had a number of projects. I wanted to cite Cinelab and Cinecast, some funded, some non-funded. Cinelab and Cinecast were very interesting because it was an occasion to work together with Bernard Stiegler's team at Centre Pompidou with Ligne de Temps, and also ICAV and Spectacle en Ligne were also with them. So we had a number of projects with other teams. Data was an experiment with students from art schools, museography with the museographers, and so on. So these all built interesting ideas, also improvements also in Advene. So I won't go in the details here. I will just talk about the last one, which is the most recent one, which is the ADA project, which was with the Freie Universität in Berlin, a team of media studies, and HPI at Potsdam, so a team more technological, dedicated on AI algorithms to analyze movies and semantic web. And Advene was here to bridge the gap between both, so to help the media studies team create the data, annotate the videos, producing the data or analyzing data that was in and out from the HPI team. And this pushed a bit the software because, for instance, for a single video, for a single movie, we analyze a corpus of movies. You can have 20,000 annotations to annotate. So it was intensive annotation with very structured ontology-based structures. And one of the important things I wanted to mention here is that it was used. So there are different the points after the first one were the important points for the project, because we had to add some features like bridge for semantic web interoperability, import from data from the algorithms that they built. And they also agreed to fund the maintenance of the software, because this is the part that we had a software that worked, but I knew at the time of the project, when the project started, that it required an update for some fundamental libraries, because the software still worked, but the libraries, some versions were going to be phased out, and I needed to, for the software to continue to work, to be able to work on this. And they agreed also to fund this development. And this is something important for the parenting and maintenance of software. So I will come to the lessons. I've got 5 minutes left. Lessons learned in the course of the Advene project here. The first one is that technology is a pharmacon. So this is a concept from Stiegler, which is, I will explain to you. And so I will talk a bit about maintenance and also about usability. So building things for users and why it matters, why we have to care about this. So I think one of my pet peeves in a moment is trying to make people in humanities realize that digital humanities is it's great. It brings many things, but technology is moving and fragile. So it can be both. Pharmacon, I didn't explain the concept. It's both a cure and a disease. So the cure, the really positive thing about technology is the things that enables us to do. But if you're in technology, like practicing technology, you realize how fragile it is, how it relies on things that we don't necessarily understand or can maintain. And I say that from a computer scientist perspective. And also that technical debt can accumulate. So technical debt is a concept where you make decisions, implementation decisions, concrete decisions about a software at one time. It can lead you into a dead end or at least slow your process down over time. An example of technical debt appears here. For instance, why Just a reminder that in 2001, when we started Advene, the video didn't exist on the web. You had to use flash players, and the video was very low quality. You had to use this additional plugin. And another team did the same decision because they started at the same time as ours in 2001, the Ligne de Temps by Bernard Stiegler. They decided to write Ligne de Temps in Flash, and then Flash got deprecated in 2017 and disappeared in 2020. And then the software does not exist anymore. You cannot access the software now, except if you keep an old computer with outdated software, outdated browser to be able to run it. And this is a problem, technology problem. This can be related to technical debt. And this has no solution except the luck. We are lucky to have something, to use a technology that's still being maintained. We have maintenance issue. We have to adapt it to the new versions, but it's still being maintained, and this is luck. There's an important thing. So things we can do is, for instance, the using standards. So in 2001, annotations were not standardized. You had many initiatives, like for instance, one of the main browsers at the beginnings of the web in the 1990s was Mosaic, and it had annotation built in. And then it disappeared from many browsers because no one used it. But it was there at the beginning of the web. It was not standardized. Now we've got this web annotation standard, which is used by IIIF, and it got standardized in 2017. So obviously in Advene it didn't exist. And so for preceding models like ours, we have to embrace the standard. New projects should obviously use that standard, and the old ones have to adapt. So you've got to do model adaptation on the software, which also requires maintenance. Something also about the fact that Advene is a desktop application. So Advene has the desktop application because, as I said at the time, to do video, you didn't have much more. But the browser has become the universal runtime, and it's great. But beware of small discrepancies between browsers. It's not that ideal in terms of maintenance and technological burden on the developer side. And some things are not possible with it, like reading video, exotic video formats. You can do that in Advene. Reading DVDs, you can do that in Advene, but you cannot do that with the browser. And where is your data is also something important, because it hides the data. Okay, it stays somewhere in the cloud or whatever, and it's not anymore a file that you have on your computer and then you can back up. It's something that's important to consider. Yeah, 2 minutes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. But the problem is that building cross-platform desktop applications is also very hard and very fragile. So obviously, if I were to start Advene again from the scratch, like for instance the Scene project, I would obviously use web browsers, despite what I said in the previous slide. I talked about the maintenance burden, so I won't go. Yeah, it was the same. Technology power comes with the cost. We talked about it. We did a presentation together with Jasper Stratil in DH last June. So you can have a look at it if you're interested. And I also want to mention a really interesting book in French, Le Temps des Choses, which is The Care of Things by a sociologist called Jérôme Denis, which talks about this maintenance issue. So maintenance studies is a field that is evolving and is very important and crucial for everyone. And the standards, here I wanted to talk about standards, but yeah, there are standards for data, and we want to preserve data through using standards, but we also have the problem of software preservation, because research outputs is not just the data, it's also the things that we did with the data to create it or to use it. And this is embedded into the software, so it's important to preserve the software. And how do we preserve the software? Open source seems like a part of the solution, but then open source software needs contributors, maintainers, and funding. And to get all of this, you need to build a strong, diverse, and interdisciplinary community. And basically, that's anyway the key point I wanted to stress. I got other slides after, but I think I will stop at this and welcome your questions.
So thank you very much, Olivier, for that presentation. It was very interesting. I can open the floor to some questions, if people have some remarks already for Olivier. I can get things rolling. I'm really interested to hear you talk about things like this from a computer science point of view and as a developer. And yeah, I mean, you talked about it briefly during your presentation, but I was wondering, in terms of the computer science and the developer community, how have you seen the approach to interoperability sort of progress over the last 20 years? Is it something that developers are being told to really bear in mind when developing their solutions, or is it something that's coming from the DH community? How's that?
Interoperability is not sought by developers anyway. I would say that from a developer point of view, I would be agnostic with respect to interoperability because I want to innovate. If I want to innovate at the beginning, you cannot be interoperable because you want to build interesting new things, and these things cannot be interoperable with anything that doesn't exist. And so this is the part where you don't want interoperability in this case. And then afterwards, if your software begins to be used and for the sake of preservation and all of that, you will have to get users and other people, so other stakeholders in the project. And then that's when interoperability becomes a concern and you begin to think about it. So, for instance, the video annotation standards or the annotation standards did not emerge from nothing. This is the expression of an interoperability need, but it was built from previous experiments that dated back years before. And this project had not interoperability in mind. It comes after, once you've built a number of projects and you say, okay, we have different competing things, and how do we work together? But you first have to realize that you have common things. For instance, I mentioned ligne de temps. This may be a good example. The ligne de temps by Bernard Stiegler, we started the projects at the same time in 2001. We met for the first time. We knew about each other in 2004 or 5. So it took 5 years of development, talking about the things. And then, oh yeah, we meet and we realized we were doing the same thing. And then we had software which was doing the same thing, video annotation and movies. But then we didn't have the same focus. Even then, we didn't have exactly the same focus, the same approach to it. In ligne de temps, it was very linear, so it was very linear on lines and so on. This metaphor was very strong and pregnant, and we came with a different background for data model. And so it took some time for us to realize, okay, we're doing the same thing, then we need to interpret, we need to be able to exchange, and we need to agree on a common data model. And this is very local between two projects. And the web standards or the other ones are between a huge number of actors. So this takes a long time to negotiate. So that's to put interoperability into long-term perspective of different projects. I don't know if this answers your question, but.
No, it does. I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, would it be fair to say that you're perhaps suggesting that basing one's, perhaps not research, but development with these goals of interoperability from the beginning can be something that can bridle development, and is something that can, yeah, that's, and it's, no, it's a really interesting way of thinking it. Scott, do you have a question?
You did make me think that in terms of a cultural project, you'd want to build into a project. For example, our source code's open, and we've had communication with, say, colleagues in Lisbon who were building an annotation tool and said, you can use our code. But I think they were at that stage exactly where you're describing. They had to think about the nature of the models they wanted to use, what their questions were, and they needed that period of time to just kind of explore options without having to be interoperable. So it's almost as if you have to build into a development cycle within a project a period of time that, okay, now we can look closely at what the possibilities are. But the development cycles aren't, you know, the trajectory tends not to include that as an option, say, a third of the way through. Okay, now we can consider that. But I was going to ask you the question, because you work with students, are you, I mean, when you communicate this kind of landscape of processes and work and histories, do you have a sense that students are leaving and going into cultural projects, or are you seeing more students leaving, going into commercial kind of business areas? One of the problems that we've had in finding good coders in cultural projects is that they are being paid much more money to work in business. Are you persuading with this kind of story to?
I'm not, for me, students are free to do whatever they like to. I'm in digital humanities because I've got a background. I have scientific background, but I also have this humanities readings, watching movies and so on. So this is cultural, and this is not something that you can do at university by doing a course, a lecture, or annotation. I won't have any influence on this whole background that will bring students into this. But I've got many students or colleagues which are, and more colleagues, I know more for the colleagues because I talk more with them, but colleagues who are frustrated in computer science, who are frustrated about the dryness of their subject, who would love to build things in digital humanities, but do not have the opportunity or the contacts to do this. And so we need to have this kind of, not necessarily, I don't know if there are many scientific people here, computer science people here, but like DH is great. All these interdisciplinary places where you can have these communities meet and get some, for instance, computer science researcher realize that, okay, I can find a link between my research and some humanities project for which I've got a strong feeling. I would love to work on this kind of project, and if they can find these opportunities to make both interests meet, and that's when you can realize things. So I think we got to find occasions to present, to make people talk together in strange settings, yeah, like presenting doing meetups or conferences, interdisciplinary conferences, and so on.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I have Rebecca Stancliffe online, who is very interested in the challenges of the tools or approaches that you adopt in video annotation scholarship. The idea of the pharmacon as a poison and a cure, what are the limitations or restrictions regarding the knowledge bases of the communities that you work with, i.e. media studies?
The technology for pharmacon is something that I really think this is the case. So as a computer scientist, we're always running. It's even more. I did have some slides on AI that I didn't have time to present, and this is a huge example of a pharmacon because it's impressive in what it can do, and then we still have even less than before mastery of how it works. We don't know why it works. We don't know how it works. We just realize that we put some numbers and do some statistics and get probabilistic things out of it, and we'll rely on things like this, and this is a problem. At both sides, I'm using it in some very constrained and specific ways because I have this previous experience that allows me to have a critical view on it. But the problem is that the younger generations just come with it, and we will tell them, okay, this is the truth that comes out of it. And all the real experiments that were done in legal domain in the US, or even in you can easily fool an AI to tell you what you want to hear. It's like the old tales from Oriental tales about the person who flattered the vizier because they said what he wanted to hear. And AI is exactly this. We want to extract data from something, and it gives us exactly the data that was extracted. But okay, we read only the first 5 lines, and we trust the AI that the rest of the data is correct too. But we don't know that. And that was one on my slides. It was a defense also for manual annotation tools, because we need tools to be able to curate and validate and evaluate the output of AI algorithms. Because I really don't trust AI algorithms. They're creative, they're interesting, but I will not trust their result without a real evaluation by a human. It was a bit far away from the question, but okay.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for your fascinating talk.